In this lesson, I'm going to give you a very basic understanding of what Autodesk Revit is and how you can get up and running with it quickly. So whenever I open the program, this is the first thing that pops up. And I'm going to be doing some architectural work, so I'm going to go ahead and pick the architectural template. Whenever I click this, it's going to preload some different things. It's going to have some different components that are preloaded, some different views already set up, probably some levels and different wall types loaded. So whenever this comes up, I start out in level 1. So that's my view right now. So you can change your views, what you're looking at, by clicking on this project browser over here. Right now, the level 1 is a plan view. And you can't really tell much because I don't have anything in there. So I'm just going to real quickly come up to the wall button. So I'm on my architecture tab. There's a lot of different tabs here. We're going to start out with the architecture tab. I'm going to click on the wall button. And whenever I click on the wall button, the first thing that happens is that my properties change from the properties for my view to the properties for my wall. So whatever's active, that's what it's going to show the properties for. So the properties of the wall, there's all kinds of different properties, and a lot of these just aren't going to matter to you at this point. But as you go through, many of them are really important, and we can quickly just look at the first one here. This first one is just to choose which type of wall you want to use. So the default one is a basic wall, generic 8. So it's just a very generic wall that's 8 inches thick. We have all kinds of different walls in here. Generic 5, generic 6, generic, there's exterior walls, there's interior walls, foundation walls. So to start out with, for our project, our little tiny house project, I think the first place that you want to start out with is maybe a generic 5, and even that's a little bit thick, but we could go with that and give it a start. And the idea is whenever we start getting into our project and learn about construction a little bit more, we can click on this edit type and we can do duplicates of this wall, and we can change it to basically any type of wall that we want. But for now, we're just going to start with this generic 5 because it's close to what we're going to be using. So I can bring my cursor over to the screen, and if I left click, I can just start drawing. So left click, and you can see that there's dimensions or measurements showing how long my wall is. So this wall that I did is actually 116 feet 6 inches long, which is extremely large for a tiny house. Anything but tiny. So I can just leave that there, and the next time I draw, maybe I zoom in a little bit and I take a closer look and get close to where I want to be. I don't have to be exactly where I want it to be. So I'm just going to do 20 by 10. And I'm going to draw my rectangle, hit escape, get out of that, and I'm going to get rid of all this. So I'm just going to click on these things, hit the delete button, and now I have these walls right here. The cool thing about this, I'm actually drawing in 2D view, but if I click on the little 3D button up here, I'm really drawing in 3D view also. And if I hit shift or hold in shift and press the wheel in on my mouse and move my mouse around, I can zoom around, look at that from different views, different perspectives. And then if I want to go back to my level 1, I double click on the level 1 over here in the project browser and it takes me back. Alright, the next thing to get you up and running quickly is right now if I click on this it's about 19 feet 6 from the center of that wall to the center of that wall. I don't know exactly how big this I want to be, maybe 24 by 8 feet wide. So instead of grabbing these and trying to get them exactly the size I want, I'm going to do this. I'm going to click on my Annotate tab, and then I'm going to find my dimensions. I'm going to use this Align Dimension. Whenever I click on that, this little menu here comes up. I can choose whether to pick individual reference or entire walls. I'm going to leave it on individual reference. And I can choose whether I want to add dimensions to the center line of the walls, or the wall faces, center of core, or face of core. We're going to pick wall faces right now. So if I choose wall faces, now it's basically prompting me down here to choose the walls that I want to dimension. So I want to dimension from the outside of this wall to the outside of that wall. So I first pick the first wall, then the second wall, and then my third click is to tell it where the dimension string is going to live. And I will do the same thing for these two walls. And I stay away from the corner because it's easier to pick on this part of the wall and then drag it out here. And then I'm going to hit Escape twice to get out of that. Now that I have these dimensions on there here, the really cool thing is I can change the size of the building with the dimensions. So I'm not going to click on the dimension to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the wall. And I want to click on the wall that I want to change. So I'm going to leave this corner alone, and I'm going to move the building in from this direction. So whenever I click on that wall, this dimension right here highlights. So does this temporary dimension. I want to click on the dimension that I have in there, the permanent dimension. So again, I click on the wall I want to move, and then I click on the dimension that I want to change. And it highlights, and it gives me the ability to change that. So I'm just going to type in 8, hit enter, and it changes it to 8 feet. Again, I want to change this wall. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to click on my permanent dimension value, and I'm going to type in 24 and hit enter. And now I've changed both dimensions, and I've actually changed the size of the building. So now that I have the wall dimensions changed and I have permanent dimensions on there, I could very easily change this to anything that I want it to be. So the next thing I'm going to show you is to actually how you can very quickly and easily determine what the kind of the scale of your drawing is going to be. And whenever I'm talking about that, the scale is actually listed down here. Right now, the scale of the drawing is 1/8 inch. I can change that to 1/4 inch, and it's going to make my dimensions look smaller. I'm going to go ahead and leave it back at 1/8, or maybe even drop it down to 3/32 so that I can see the dimensions on the screen. Right now, I'm not worried about the actual scale of the drawing. What I'm really worried about is what stuff can fit on inside of this. So as a new designer, it's pretty difficult to see anything other than a rectangle here. I'm not looking at 4 walls, I'm just looking at a rectangle. So the one thing that you can help get yourself over that idea with is by adding some stuff to the drawing. So if I click on the Architecture tab and I click on Component, I have the option of adding different components. Right now this desk comes up, default desk. And if I go in here, I can add trees and things like that. There's really not a whole lot of different things in here. So what I want to do is click on this Load Family. And whenever I click on Load Family, I have a window that comes up and I can browse through these folders to find different things. So I'm going to click on the Furniture folder, and I'm going to open up a bed. So there's 4 or 5 different types of beds in here. I'm just going to choose the bed standard, click open, and now I can drop that in here. If I drop that right there, I can go through and I can drop a lot of them. So the default one was a double bed, which is 54 by 75. So what I want to do is, since this is a tiny house, I'm going to use a twin size bed. So I come up here to my properties and I change it to twin size. And I'll drop that within the drawing. And what I can do also, a lot of times whenever you're doing something like a tiny house, your standard size furniture isn't going to fit. So I can very often come in here, and I'll do that once again. I'll click on the bed, I'll hit edit type, and I'm going to make a duplicate of it. I'm going to call this tiny bed. Just some kind of unique name so that I'm not overwriting the values of the existing bed that's in there. And you can see it lists the dimensions: 6'3" for the length, 3 feet 2 inches for the width. So maybe I make the width 26 inches and we leave the length at 6 feet 1 inch. And I say OK, and it automatically makes that bed the actual size. So I can delete that one, I can grab this, drag it over there, I can click on it, I can make a copy of it, I can rotate it, click on the rotate button, maybe I stack these so that one would be over top of the other. And now I can start to get a better idea of how this is all going to lay out and what I can fit inside of here and how big it needs to be. The last thing I'm going to show you for this introductory video is if I click on the 3D button up here, little picture of a house, it's going to take me to the 3D view like I showed before, and now we actually have some stuff in there. And again, to get back to the floor plan view, I double click on level 1. And this is basically just enough information to get you started, get you rolling, so that you can come up with a very basic design.